on topic. So welcome to this third webinar with which we conclude this FMC webinar series. I would like to welcome all participants. Thank you again for joining us today for this hour and a half to explore this topic. And also I would like to thank all the speakers for joining us today. So Mrs. Daniela Stepic from Ministry of Finance of Croatia, Mr. and my colleague Nihat Nakash from the CEF. This is the institution, Knowledge Hub, which is finance official through the program. And in this year, we decided to create webinar series, and our mini FMC series is part of the program. So we established or created FMC webinar series to elaborate on implications of PIC reforms, also to talk about preconditions that need to be in place to implement financial management and control, so FMC, also to raise understanding on roles and responsibilities of different actors to implement FMC, and also, as title of our webinars indicate, also to elaborate on implementation from Ministry of Finance to then also practice in line ministries. So I think that joined our first two webinars. I would just like to mention that in the first and second webinar, and all recordings of those are available on our website. We talked about the benefits of PIC and FMC reforms. We also talked about some strategic considerations of these reforms. We heard case studies from Netherlands in the first webinar. Then in the webinar, we focused on FMC as a management reform, and we also heard some practice from Croatia. I would just like to share some technical information. So we kindly ask you to stay muted, just to assure that the sound is good during presentations. But we ask you to use chat area to send message or some question to us, and please select send to everybody so we catch your message or your question is. Also, we are recording this webinar, and the recording will be available on our website. This webinar will aim to provide opportunity to exploring an assessment component in FMC, and also to explore annual quality checking carried out by MoF. And at the end, we will summarize the main points raised in the whole this webinar series. So after my short introduction, we will give word to Mrs. Daniela Stepic, head of sector on budget planning from Ministry of Finance Croatia. She will talk about Ministry of Finance perspective. She will talk about also results from Croatia regarding annual checking on performance of IFC. Then we will give word to Mr. Noel Hapford, and he will talk about the real responsibility for FMC. So specifically, he will talk about responsibility for implementation of FMC, and also responsibility, who's responsible for reporting on effectiveness of FMC. After those two presentations, Mr. Nihat Nakash, CEF Senior Program Advisor, will conclude with main takeaways from this webinar series, and we will also leave some time for your questions and answer session. Just like to mention before we start with that site, you can already see our 2018 program. So we welcome you to visit our events page and browse through initiatives, and you can already also apply to initiatives that you find interested in. Also, our online initiatives are published on CEF Online Learning Campus, so you can also apply to online such webinars with which we will continue in 2018 on CEF Online Learning Campus. And also, of course, please follow us on social media so that we can stay connected, and you will be able also to get messages about our future learning initiatives. So, word to Mrs. Pepic. And before, she will present a case of Croatia. Hello, Daniela. So, you'll read CHU in Croatia. So she will talk about MoF perspective, Croatian experience, specifically regards to monitoring and assessment. So Daniela, thank you for joining us, and the word is yours. So start sharing your screen now.
I hope it will be okay with technical issue, because this is my, to be honest, first time that I am doing webinar in this way to present the things. Do you see my presentation now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please just open
slide.
Slide.
Okay.
Okay.
Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. So as Kaya said, my topic will cover issues regarding how the Ministry of Finance is assessing the functionality of system of public internal financial control. And I would like to share with you, first of all, that this is one initiative that we started last year when preparing the report for 2015 about the system of internal control. We start with presenting some kind of measurable impacts of system of internal control when they function. So we want somehow to share with readers of report about the system of internal controls some tangible information, let's say. So, and I would like to present how we are doing that, what are, let's say, still our challenges in that regard. So I hope so that it will be interesting to you to hear, and I would like also to invite you to ask questions, and I would share what experience we have in that regard. As I said, been leading the Central Harmonization Unit almost 9 years, from 2008 in Croatia, and recently I am the head of sector for budget preparation in Ministry of Finance. So from this perspective, I think that I even now can see more clear how it's important system of internal control, and how much, let's say, it's valuable if this system is working properly, especially in regard of quality of overall budget cycle processes. So this is a short introduction. Croatia is, in fact, now it's almost 15 years of intensive activities regarding implementation and development of public internal financial control. And let's say after 10 years, really, okay, take 2002 and 2003 as a year when we start with the beginning of overall understanding the concept, but really concrete actions regarding implementation of system of internal control started in 2004. I think after 10 years, it's really important that the Central Harmonization Unit make some kind of initiatives and start to somehow measure the real concrete benefits that system of internal controls can bring. And when we have obligation as a Ministry of Finance to prepare annual report about system of internal control, last year Central Harmonization Unit, let's say, decided to make one step further and try to get somehow measurable effects of functional system of internal controls, and also to see all of our parties, internal auditors, finance officer, and the most important managers, what did they do and how, and what have been the benefits when these three parties, managers, finance officer, and internal auditors, really work together in improve the system of internal control. So my presentation will give you overview of what we did in that regard and what results we have at this moment. And as I said in the beginning, we are in that regard assessing the system of internal controls and having some kind of measurable effect. Really, for Croatia, this is also, let's say, some kind of experiment in the beginning. So discussion in that regard will be also very beneficial for me and for us in Ministry of Finance who are dealing with that very important. I will just remind you on let's say something that is familiar, I think, to all people who are actively involved in PFC and in particular in Central Harmonization Unit. We have three, let's say, ways of assessing the functioning of PFC system according to 5 components of causal model. So this is self-assessment, this is an audit, and external audit, meaning first of all for budget organization, the role of supreme audit institutions. These are, let's say, the methods and the sources where you can get some information about the quality and the functionality of system of internal control. Self-assessment is something that managers and head of budget organizations should perform. First of all, managers on their daily basis, they have opportunity to see whether their system is working or not, and what should be improved in order that the areas for which they are responsible are performing the task in a way that is everything according, let's say, legality. Also, that what they are doing is done in an economical, efficient, and effective way, that at the end the users of our services are pleased. So there's many aspects through which system of internal control should be improved in order that manager could go home satisfied after they spent at work, that he did everything in the best way, that at the end what he is obliged to deliver to their institution and also to the users of that public sector institution should provide is done on proper way. So this is the self-assessment. They have to assess, they have to continuously improve the system. Once a year, usually countries like Croatia have such called statement of fiscal responsibility that we have in Croatia. The statement of fiscal responsibility is done once a year, and this means that it must be assessed the control system in basic in the basic budget cycle processes. I will give few more information later on the the following slides. But self-assessment as a source of information, it's, let's say, something that is tool of measures, and they have to assess the system of internal controls and also provide some kind of information what they will do and how to improve the system. Second important tool for assessing the quality, for assessing the system of internal control, I will more focus on functionality. Let's say whether this system is functioning on proper way or not, yet to go in, let's say, wide perspective, how efficient it is. I think at this moment I don't have all information for that, but I would focus on functionality of system of internal controls. Okay. Second source of information is internal audit. In Croatia, we have around 300 auditors, also years and years behind us regarding developing internal audit function. And I think that we have auditors really who can perform excellent job, and we wanted to show, okay, what is the benefits of internal audit function, how they can really be trigger for improving the system of internal controls. When we talk about internal audit, of course, this is never one-point story. Internal auditors should have also managers who will actively support implementation of recommendation. But anyway, internal audit is important source of information, how the system is functioning, internal audit recommendation showing us where this system should be improved, and at the end, when you have the manager who accept this internal audit recommendation and implement them, also something that we should, of course, take in consideration and to see how these systems, when they are functioning well, when recommendations are implemented, what benefits has been achieved. Assessment and internal audit, these are, let's say, the tools of assessing the system of internal control established on the level of budget organization. So head, minister, mayor, they have, let's say, two very important ways to get information, how their system for which they are responsible working, what we improve, whether these areas where the more improvements are identified are really improving. So self-assessment and internal audit are tools of budget organization to assess the system, and if assessing this, of course, there always must be some kind of actions taken based on the conclusions from these assessments. Important source of information about the system of internal control, of course, is State Audit Office reports, where also, especially, I will talk first of all about based on experience. So, State Audit Office provides for us also important information how these systems are working and what and how should be improved, because if you open this report, you will see audit findings, but also recommendations. So these are these three systems. Now is the issue how you will use these systems as a CHU. I will talk now from the perspective of CHU to really have some data, let's say, of information for preparing your reports, your annual reports about the system of internal controls. But what is also most important for you as a CHU to see in general how systems are working, what coordinating activities regarding development, and what should be improved. So the report that we are in Croatia preparing 2015 and 16 are based on these three sources of information. And in addition, once we prepare the report, we are also using our PFC Council, where our Minister of Finance is sitting together with the Ministry of Public Administration, Ministry of Regional Development in Croatia, representatives of all counties in Croatia, representatives of all cities in Croatia, so that all these parties, representatives also of state audit institutions, where we have opportunity as a CHU to present what are the results of these sources of information that we collected, and also to discuss and maybe to have some kind of agreement about some measures that should be taken in order that we somehow have direction and also some concrete action for improvement of system of internal control. Just speaking for 2016, this consolidated annual report has been prepared in a way that Central Harmonization Unit analyzed around 612 fiscal responsibility statements. I would just briefly inform you that Ministry of Finance receiving fiscal responsibility statement of first line budget organization, ministries, cities, counties, and municipalities. Second and third line budget organization, they are submitting their fiscal responsibility statement to their first line, to their, let's say, ministries, cities, or counties, which are responsible for them. So it's an obligation and responsibility of first line budget organization to analyze and to see how the system of internal controls is functioning regarding budget organizations that are under their consolidated report. Ministry of Finance is analyzing the fiscal responsibility statement only the first level. And of course, in that analysis, we are asking and we are checking, okay, we can at this moment how they are coordinating and how they are, let's say, cooperating and assessing, of course, system of internal controls of their second and third line. Internal audit activities, we have made analysis of 79 internal audit opinions, that means opinions based on all year activities. 79, this is also internal audit reports primarily from the first level budget organization, but since we wanted to somehow get this, let's say, source information, we are using internal audit reports if internal audit is established on the second level budget organization, which are big, like extra budgetary user and hospitals, because we are also taking their reports in analysis that we are performing. And external audit activities, so we analyze the report of state audit for which is some kind of also consolidated report for all budget organizations that they perform in 2016. Regarding responsibility statement, source of information provides information about system of internal controls in crucial budget cycle processes. That means budget planning, budget preparation, budget financial planning execution, public procurement, accounting, and the report. Just brief statistics, just that you can get some, let's say, info how the situation looks like. Out of 612 budget organization, meaning fiscal responsibility statement that we have analyzed, 78% is the fiscal responsibility statement where some kind of weaknesses in the system have been identified. A percentage is high, but to be honest, we will be surprised that it is not such a high, because system of internal controls, at least we from the CHU is seeing that in a way that always you have the areas where the system could be better and could be further improved. So when we say weaknesses, that means, okay, which are, let's say, some points in the system of internal control where we should put some more focus in the following year to be in a way that this system is working properly. When we are 2015 and 16, we have really just slight improvements regarding in number of statements which are 1A. 1A means statements without identified weaknesses. But these kind of statements are always under our additional monitoring, let's say, because, as I said, we see that system of internal control, if are analyzed really properly and deeply, and with some, let's say, ideas, okay, this is what is working, but next year we would try to improve some parts of system of internal control, then it's expectable that you will have a percentage of these in fiscal responsibility statement where you identify weaknesses. So if we compare 2015-16, it seems that, okay, really we have some progress regarding the number of internal fiscal responsibility statements without identify weaknesses is a little higher than previous year. But this is usually result if previous year on some of the questions says, okay, we don't have it or it's not developed enough, they improve in the following years. But as I say, still percentage of these fiscal responsibility statement with identified weaknesses is high. Compare areas where the system of internal controls requires, let's say, the majority of improvements according to the current situation. This is on the first place internal control system in budget execution processes, but also in accounting. These are the results of self-assessment. This area, budget execution, accounting, self-assessment instruments, budget organizations, let's say, admitted they need the majority of actions to be taken regarding improvements of system of internal controls. Just summary, what are, let's say, the areas where these systems require to be further improved? First, budget organization emphasis the needs to improve controls. And when I controls, I mean really not only controlling the invoices, really the system of controls. This is just summarized in one word, controls, but that means many issues regarding ex ante, ex post control when we are talking about donation, grants, and subsidies, which means that in that area further controls are needed in order that for what are, let's say, money through donation, grants, and subsidies, really achieving, let's call this value for money issues, that which is always for the budget organizations, institutions, I think, big challenge to establish proper system of managing and controlling. Second, where it's, let's say, emphasis put regarding the system of internal control should be improved is assessment and costing of investment projects, which are usually pretty high much of the budget resources to be allocated, and it's always, let's say, challenge how you will assess what will be the overall cost of investment projects and what will be the benefits and returns to the public society. And interesting area, according to the results of self-assessment, where budget organizations said that it's additional efforts needed to improve the system of control is also collection of revenues and receipts in the budget organization. For all areas, I don't want to spend now lots of time, but for all the areas where some weaknesses have been in the budget organization, also prepare some kind of plan of actions regarding how to mitigate these weaknesses, or of course how to remove them. But these are, let's say, the actions that budget organization oblige themselves. It is also plans that are signed by the head of budget organization that in the following period this system will be improved. Regional audit. we included, of course, the results of our audit activities in the previous year, what and how did they audit, and also what have been the results of audit. As I said, after 10 years of intensive work with internal auditors, we wanted to show that internal audit, if the quality of their report is okay, if they established cooperation with the management, which means that management understand why they have audit. Managers are taking action when audit suggests or recommend that some activities should be done in order to minimize or to escape from some risk that organization is facing. We must have some kind of measurable impact. So we wanted to show this measurable impact and to show that this function, together with active management, can bring really some measurable financial impact. And following slides, I will present you this impact. What's important to tell, when we compare what have been also the focus of audit activities in 2016, we saw that out of 272 audits performed in first level budget organization, 208, which means around 77% of audits have been audits really which through these audits we covered the areas from fiscal responsibility statement. So we make some kind of matching. Okay, what are the problems that self-assessment showed? And self-assessment shows that in budget execution, we really have areas where we need to improve the system of controls. Interesting to see that audit, if you check which are the area where internal audit put efforts the mostly, it is also in this area, budget, financial plan execution. You can see 68 audits, but what is more valuable, this 100 audits has been performed in a way that, of course, it has been combining all areas of budget cycle processes. 77 audits, what is important, in 78% also, 78% of audits, of course, it has been included recommendations, what and how should be improved, which means system is working, it's functioning, but of course area for improvements are exist, and it's important to put efforts to improve in the system. External audit report. We have these additional source of information. But because this is somehow additional objective, let's assure that the issue that it has identified through self-assessment or through internal audit report, we want to see what additionally state audit office is saying that needs to improve. Why we have these additional weaknesses identified through reports of external audit? First of all, in some of our core that we are using for fiscal responsibility statement, we of course didn't cover all issues that could be in practice and in life. So in some parts questions are missing. Some of questions we are now considering again to input a questionnaire based on which fiscal responsibility statement is prepared. So we wanted to see, okay, what external is saying additionally and what we need maybe to also include in our question. That have been for CHU important info, but also for us it has been important info to see what and how we should improve. But also one of important issue when budget organization performs self-assessment and also internal audit is doing based on their risk assessment, it's always some risk for the CHU, let's say, and also for the Ministry of Finance that maybe it wasn't so honest from the budget organization to put all the right answers on the questions, or maybe internal audit didn't audit, of course, and some of the areas. And then it's important to see what audit office is saying. But since we all have in our countries all these three sources, matters their self-assessment, internal auditors and external auditors, and I think they will exist forever, these three, let's say, blocks. It's important that we use all three of them, because once you using all three sources, you have somehow complementary approach in the information how the system is working. For example, just to show you, if you ask just simple question, do you have procedures for revenue collections? Through self-assessment, budget users, okay, we have procedures in place covering revenue collections. But external audit can additionally explore quality of these procedures, or maybe whether they are applied properly or not. So in the State Audit Office report, you will see information, okay, in some budget organization, let's say, despite the fact that they have procedures, unfortunately, these procedures are not comprehensive, are not covering all type of revenues, and are not applied properly. In addition, although I didn't mention here, but what we additionally as a CHU analyze also financial statement reports, basically report about expenditure and receipts, report about liability. So these are additional, of course, source of information. So what does it mean if somebody have procedures, everything in paper or in computer, but not taking the actions? You can see in the financial statement, for example, what is the due or what may be the liabilities that are still open and need to be paid, and you analyze whether the actions are taken or not. Also, contract records. Do you have databases where you contain all information about contracts? These databases could be established, but if you are, for example, the State Office will additionally explore whether this information regarding contract potential liabilities that could come from the contract are properly taken in consideration. So just to show you that to get some better information about this system, it's really important to combine all sources of information that you have. End of presentation. Let's say my favorite one, because really, from as I said, we wanted to show, okay, if we have implemented internal audit recommendation, which means somehow we, in the previous year, let's say, you can see in our web page, we have been reporting about internal audit activities. Okay, these are the number of auditors that we have in place. These are the number of institutions where audit plays are fulfilled. This is the number of audits. This is the number of areas covered by audit. This is the number of implemented recommendations. So after, I don't know, 7 years, it was even boring for me reading this type of the report. We wanted to give some more info in the whole reporting issues about PLC. So in 2015 and 2016, I don't know whether some of my auditors from Croatia are now listening me, but I'm really proud on many of them, because they did it right, really excellent job over years. And once they ask them, meaning CHU asked them to provide us some measurable impacts of implemented recommendation, there have been really a number of auditors who cooperate with CHU, with finance units, and we came to the numbers through which we could really show that once you have improved internal control system and you monitor how these improvements influence on the, at the end, figures in your financial statements, you can find links. You can find the links between what have been improved regarding controlling and managing and controlling the system, and you can find some better figures in your financial statement. So in this 2015 and 16 annual report, we make the links between what part of internal control system have been improved, and how these affected, let's say, improvements in collection of revenues, improvements in control over expenditure, refunding budget sources back to budget if they are not spent as we said, according to the purpose and according to some kind of criteria that has been set. Also, putting accounting records in better order. Don't forget, system of internal control also has a purpose to ensure that financial reporting is comprehensive. But if you are not having proper system of accounting databases, you cannot produce a comprehensive financial report. And if you don't have, as a manager, comprehensive financial report, that you don't have full information for making your decision. And this is at the end, but important, the refunding of sources from EU funds, if that is possible for some of activities. You have better system of controls. There must be some effects on that regard. These are the figures here. So you see, when we started to add the financial effects of improved PFC system, implemented internal audit recommendation. In this title, every word is important because it's not only, I know with the first question when I ask internal auditor, what are the financial effects of your work? And then many of auditors who really understand my question said, but this is not only my work. I said, I know it's not your work. You just gave recommendation. You trigger managers with your good reports that they can be more successful. And you convince them that they can be more successful, that they can have revenue collection, that they can better control their expenditure, that they can please maybe the citizen with some reducing the number of administrative barriers, or maybe even reduce some costs of some fees to the citizens. And manager will be pleased with that. So a manager who implemented internal audit recommendation, of course, it would have been their joint work to come to this figure. When we asked in 2015 for the first time about this financial impact, you see it has been only 51 million kunas. That is approximately, let's say, 800 euros. But in the second year, in the second round, when we ask again for the financial impact, these figures have been much higher, because after 1 year working intensively with internal auditors in a way that try to assess what is added value that you really bring to the system, we reach to the number of 218 million kunas, which is around 29, let's say, million euros, in sense of some kind of measurable impact that could be calculated based on some improvements regarding the system of internal control. Through increase of revenue, reduction of expenditure, refund of budgetary funds, arranging accounting records, reduction deficit, etc. I don't want to spend you now lots of time. I will give you just one example, because here is a number of examples that I have taken from this. What concretely we in the annual report make really a concrete list of actions that have been taken, and also the title of institutions that have been taken in order to improve the system of internal controls, and how these controls then affected on some figures in financial statement. But I will give you, for example, just one example to get a feeling about what I'm talking about. For example, increase the revenue collection. How we come to this figure? One interesting city on our Croatia coast, beautiful one, where auditors made audit, performed the audit in the revenue collection area, where they wanted to explore what are the possibilities, let's say, for the city to increase maybe revenues? What kind of activities or action could be maybe reorganized, rechanged, where we have maybe the risk of lost opportunities? They audited the areas regarding the marketing boards, which means that companies can have advertisement in the city, and how they as a city arrange this type of revenue collection. And notice that there could be kind of scale, criteria, graduating, depending how you will issue the let's say the contract with these companies. And this joint work of auditors and manager who have been responsible, because that manager didn't have, let's say, financial skills, auditors and also financial officer had some other priorities to deal in that city. But internal auditor who noticed that there are maybe risk of lost opportunities, that city maybe can collect more revenue than is collecting, and what could be done in order to collect more. There has been joint work of internal auditors and managers, and at the end they really increase the revenue collection on yearly basis, which I say that if you have properly done audits and if you improve the system of internal control, these are financial effects on yearly basis, but improved system is some kind of guarantee that in the next year you will continue to collect this sum of money, maybe even higher. So I put that financial effects which are realized will accumulate in the following years, because you didn't focus on transaction, you focus on the system of control, you improve the way of managing, and then this is giving you some kind of sustainability. Let's say that you assume now it could be even better in the following year. Details about what I was presenting now are contained. It's a language, but on our web page. So this annual report where we try to combine these three sources of information. We try to, let's say, make some experiment with assessing the measurable impacts of the system, is visible in our report on our web page. So for all of you who would like maybe to see more detail, here is the links where you can find it. That I took lots of time for you, but I hope so that it have been useful for you. Many thanks.
Thank you, Daniela, for this very comprehensive presentation in which you really described what are sources of information for you, how it's important to use these sources available. Also, you described your experiment. So thank you very much for sharing this information. I think that this is very valuable for all of us, for all that want to introduce measuring or functioning, as you said, of PIFC, or working on improvements or of assessing. Yes, I can only add that you will receive all the slides, so you will be able to go again through all the materials. And in the meantime, if you have any question, also for Daniela or any other speakers, please share it in chat area. Now we will give word to Mr. Noel Hapford, public policy professional, who will share with us or explore with us who is actually responsible for implementing FMC and who is responsible for reporting, monitoring or reporting on effects of FMC. So we will listen to Noel's presentation from management point of view. What we already also pointed out in previous webinars, that it's very important that managers have and also that realize this responsibility. So Noel, word is yours.
Thank you much, and good morning, everybody. The important word in this presentation is the word real responsibility for implementing FMC. I think it's important because my experience in many countries is that there isn't really an acceptance of substantial responsibility by people who ought to be accepting responsibility. I'll go through in this presentation who ought to be accepting responsibility. My first point is I will cover 4 points in this talk. Who owns FMC? Responsible for implementation. This impacts on the role of the finance officer, and then somebody has to report, as Daniela has been saying, on the effectiveness of FMC. Well, I would argue that the person who really owns FMC is the manager. And the manager is designed to encourage to help the manager achieve objectives and to do so efficiently and effectively. And the manager will be accountable for the way in which he has achieved these objectives. So there are important questions, assumptions that lie behind these statements for the manager. And it's always clear in many countries who the manager actually is. The second question is, do managers have objectives? And again, usually objectives don't exist, or if they do, they're not really very well defined. And what is meant by efficiency and effectiveness? And again, a lot of misunderstanding about what is meant by efficiency and effectiveness. And in Central and Eastern European countries that I've been to, is that the decision maker in many of these cases is the minister or the mayor. These are regarded as the managers, and the minister or mayor is simply responsible for everything. And the civil servants who work in these various organizations, they really don't make decisions. They're just administrators, and all decisions are made, no matter how trivial they are, by politicians, by deputy ministers, mayors, and so on. Wholly incompatible with FMC, because a minister or mayor does time or experience or training to implement FMC, and police are rarely appointed for their managerial skills, and yet are expected to be the managers. They change for political and not managerial reasons, often change very frequently. So it's quite difficult to decide to implement FMC to rely on the minister or the mayor or even deputy ministers to act as the managers. Most countries that I've dealt with don't regard FMC as a management reform. They regard it as a financial reform. Emphasis always is upon finance. So as a result of all of this, the FMC is regarded as a Ministry of Finance reform rather than a managerial reform, which ought to be owned by the managers of any ministry, because it's there to help them achieve their objectives. And this of responsibility and reporting is often on the finance officer, and usually then that's accompanied by a token requirement that the minister or the mayor sign an accountability statement. But that's actually unfair on the minister or mayor or deputy minister. And the other problem with it is that requirements of FMC are taken out of context, and the best example of that is with the risk management. This is perceived as a nice little activity, not little necessarily, but a nice activity which can be introduced, and it doesn't require anything else other than to think about risk. But in fact, you can undertake risk management properly with objectives, because the whole objective of COSO, intention of COSO, is that it's designed to help the manager achieve objectives. So if you have objectives, how can you meet all the requirements of COSO? The idea of smart objectives is really very important. Smart are very difficult to define, especially for many public services like health and education. And the feature that I've come across is that whilst people say we have introduced risk management because it's a nice, convenient areas such as developing the control environment, which is very important, and communications are properly implemented. So the weaknesses in the way in which FMC is being implemented. And what is that it then just becomes a bureaucratic imposition demanded of managers by the Ministry of Finance. They can't see what the benefits would be, and the only benefit appears to be satisfying the requirements of the European Commission. To be effective, it's very important to emphasize that ownership of FMC should be with the manager, not anybody else, but with the manager. And the most important aspect of this is deciding who is the manager. And once we've decided who the manager is, does the manager have well-defined objectives? And in any big organization, any managers have lots of managers. Government will have lots of managers. The question then becomes, which manager should be responsible for FMC? But the short answer to that is that managers of whatever level should be required to ensure that the techniques of FMC should apply to the extent required. So they don't necessarily have to cover every aspect of FMC, but they should be applying all those features of FMC that are appropriate to them, and has to ensure that this happens. The question is, who is that someone to ensure that all the managers apply FMC in the most appropriate kind of way? So, in view, the manager responsible for the implementation of FMC in any organization should be the most senior manager other than a minister or mayor. And in many ministries, this would be the Secretary General. The Secretary General was a decision maker. If it's not a decision maker, then, or no civil servant was a decision maker, then the person responsible for the implementation of FMC should be a deputy, which is really a very unsatisfactory arrangement, but nevertheless is the only alternative that I can see. Whoever it is, whether it's the Deputy Minister or a Secretary General, they should have the authority of the head of the organization, the Minister or the Mayor, to enforce the implementation of FMC across the whole organization. This includes not just the organization itself, but all the subsidiary bodies which are controlled by the particular municipal organization, the ministry or the local government. So that's all agencies and their subordinate bodies. There are responsibilities that the particular person, the responsible person, should cover, and are very substantial responsibilities, and therefore this person will require training, they require quite a lot of support, and it's pretty well a full-time job. So the responsibilities of the responsible person include regular the managerial structures. Are they appropriate to deliver the objectives? What about delegation and accountability arrangements? Are they appropriate? Do they exist? Is there appropriate reporting? Do they ensure that a strategic planning process exists and that the objectives are derived from the strategic plan? Has proper control environment with the ministry? Is there proper information and communication? Does everybody know what is going on within the ministry? Is there an exchange of information? Or does everybody operate in little silos with no communication? So that to be put. Are there appropriate control arrangements throughout the organization? Once have been established, how far is risk management effective? Do the various managers pay attention to risk? Do they really pay attention to risk? Or is it just a token recognition of the importance of risk? What about the comprehensiveness and efficiency, which Daniela referred to, of the internal control system? And these are major responsibilities. The manager will be and should be accountable for the way in which the control systems have been implemented within the organization. Finance officer. Well, the role of the finance officer also changes very considerably. Yes, finance officer is the controller of the organization, and he will always remain the financial controller. But in addition, the number of other features which are set out on this slide that the manager, that the finance officer should be concerned with. I won't go through them all, but they are here, and they mean that the finance officer needs to extend his remit, needs more training, and becomes a very important advisor to various managers at various levels. The manager has to be responsible for cost control, value for money, all these things, but he needs the support of the finance officer to enable him to do that. So information systems will be required to be developed by the finance officer. Costs need to be established, and a center could be defined by the manager, not by anybody else. So you could have things like police units, university departments, resources, military units, and so on. All these areas are potential cost centers, and it's important that each manager knows what the cost is of running these various cost centers. To bring together cost and performance information, and detailed costing systems need to be developed. All of this will mean more elaborate coding structures compared to those that usually apply within organizations. And people very often they don't want to see more elaborate coding structures because it requires more effort. But it's important that costs are analyzed in much more detail than they are to the requirements of the Ministry of Finance. So responsible for reporting on FMC. Well, the should be responsible for reporting on FMC should be the who has responsibility for making sure it works within an organization. So it could be a Secretary General if the civil service are decision makers, or it could be a Deputy Minister. And this person, the Secretary General or a Deputy Minister, will be supported. It has to be supported by the Finance Department and Internal Audit. And Della has made the point very significantly about the role of Internal Audit. But the manager will require training. And from my experience, I've come across little training of managers. I've come across plenty of training of finance staff and internal audit staff, but little or no training of managers. If the manager is to be successful in implementing finance management and control, then he will or she will require training. This may sound heretical, but for the purposes of assessing the quality of the internal control system, internal audit should report to this particular manager. They've got the right to go to the minister, but on a day-to-day basis, they ought to be reporting to this particular manager about the quality of the internal control system. Now, on the slide and the next, because it was rather long, I tried to summarize the main points that should be covered. I've given an example on these slides of a form of accountability report, a reporting report, about how internal control has been implemented. And it's just important for me to mention that a manager who writes a report and sign it is very things like the role of audit, the importance of risk, forecasting of the outcomes that are coming, how the Chief Financial Officer deals with reviews, and where this report doesn't do this, compared with some of the points made by Daniela, is that it doesn't talk too much about weaknesses in this organization, because they're referred to only briefly. But you saw the full report, you would see how those weaknesses were identified. But the idea here is just to give you an idea of what such a report could cover and what it might look like. So, summarize, FMC is a management reform, and it is regarded as a management reform from the outset. Managers require objectives, and they have to decide not only what the objectives are, but who the managers actually are. All managers are responsible for implementing FMC within their areas of responsibility, but one manager, a senior manager, Secretary General or Deputy Minister, they should be responsible for the implementation of FMC, and they should be the people who should be accountable publicly for the quality of FMC within an organization. I hope that covers briefly what you find of interest, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
You know, for providing this additional interest in Florida's who is actually responsible for implementing FMC. So you stated very concretely that this should be, in your opinion, either Secretary General, so senior manager, or second or deputy minister. And also, you also pointed out who is responsible for reporting, and this is actually the same person. Now, if you have, of course, any share with regards what was said until now, what is your experience in practice, what Mr. Hepworth shared with us, or also what Daniela previously shared with us, to your message in a chat area that you can find below all participants list. So, well, that probably you are thinking about questions. We will give a word to Nihat Nakash. He will guide us through lessons learned, through what we learned in a whole series, and have some time for questions and answers. So please provide or think about what is your message or what is your opinion, what also you would like to hear in future, because we'll continue to cover FMC in our program. So Nihat, the word is yours.
Thank you very much, Kaya. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
I'm very happy to join you on this this third part of the web series on financial management and control beyond Ministries of Finance. And what I would like to do in this final presentation is to walk us through some key takeaways that we have been discussing over the past issues of this webinar. You already introduced me. My name is Nihat Nakash. I work with the CEF on the audit and accounting area, and I'm very happy to speak today with two colleagues that I admire a lot, Daniela and Noel. In terms of what we covered in FMC webinars parts 1 and 2, we started off with an overview and a brief history of what we are implementing public internal financial control reforms, why they are necessary, and how they are positioned within the broader public administration reform and public finance management reform plans. It was an excellent opportunity for all of us, I would say, in the first webinar also to hear our colleague Manfred van Kesteren speak about Dutch experience, how the financial management and control framework has evolved in this old EU member state, over time and what are some of the key observations from their current experience. So in both the second and now in the third part of the webinar series, we have had the privilege also to share the experience of our colleagues from Croatia, whether from the perspective of the Central Harmonization Unit within the Ministry of Finance, but also from the field, from those people who are involved directly in service delivery to citizens who are basically hands-on FC implementers. And I'm again very grateful to Noel Hupford, who's been with us throughout the series in trying to shed light on the management aspect of the FMC concept and what is necessary for it to work. And it's my belief, and for those of you who haven't listened in earlier, an invitation to go back and listen to the recordings of the previous two webinars. I feel that with what we have learned today, we now have a comprehensive picture of the requirements for FC and FMC to function in practice. In the following slides, I intend to give you some of the key takeaways against our webinar objectives, and one of our aims was to do more on awareness raising. What is PIFC about? What is financial management and control about? How do they interrelate? And with respect to that objective, I highlighted these 5 key takeaways, some of which Noel already mentioned. For example, the first bullet point, that there are much broader managerial implications with introducing financial management and control. It is not limited purely to the finance function, whether the Ministry of Finance or finance function in the respective budget users. Another very important takeaway that we wanted to underscore is that with public administration reforms, civil servants are more and more required to become managers, and this is an absolute necessity if we want to organize public services along the lines of compliance and efficiency and effectiveness, which raises an important point of who managers are. And without intending to reiterate what Noel mentioned, I think this call for awareness that we need to develop in our countries. I'm originally Bosnian, but in the countries of the region, civil service that is more management oriented. Another third bullet point from the top, I want to highlight that FMC is of interest as much to ministries as it is to the Ministry of Finance. In fact, when we talk a little bit later about ownership and benefits, this is the PIFC and financial management and control live in the line ministries. Another that is very important to understand is that PIFC concept is not a sitting duck, in the sense that once you have been able to introduce formal elements, you will be able to tick the boxes and say, okay, we have achieved our goal. Indeed, practice, which is the EU benchmark to public internal financial control, is a moving target and is subject to ongoing improvements, as illustrated, for example, by the changes in the COSO framework, by the updates to the internal audit standards. Most importantly, what FMC requires is the existence of evaluation and accountability mechanisms, clear objectives, ideally specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. It also requires separation of strategic and operational decision-making, a point we will return to, and ultimately within the broader context of PFF reforms and the evolution of public financial management practices, it assumes that we, on top of the inputs, we also examine how well we have achieved our objectives. Other points to promote among all the stakeholders, and there are many, is that FMC reforms, it's in isolation from broader administration reforms, and PFM reforms will be I'd say doomed to fail or to constitute a formalistic exercise. In terms of frameworks and concepts, I won't spend too much time because this is something we already know, but we must understand that FSC, public internal financial controls, they both belong within the broader context of public financial management and public administration reform. So if you take a look at this quote on bullet point 1, there will be no good governance without sound PFM, no sound PFM without effective PFC, and I've added no effective PIFC without financial management and control functioning in practice. The implications are much broader than what is immediately consider, for example, other reform processes that are taking place in your country, such as program budgeting or transition to accrual accounting, and think about management and control practices of the institutions and how they control each other. Other important point to make that for all our countries is that PIFC introduces new actors, new standards, new management tools, but it also requires complementary functions to be developed, such as better management, more in practice. Finally, all of this should take place within the context of the COSO framework, to which both Noel and Daniela have referred and have given excellent examples of what it means in practice. Also, a useful reference point that Manfred was mentioning in his presentation is the so-called 3 lines of defense model, something that something that we have been discussing.
Nihat,
yeah, I
just wanted to mention that probably we don't see your slide, your current slide. Although sharing your screen, your slide.
Okay?
No, okay, yes.
Okay, sorry. All right.
No problem.
Sorry. As Manfred was saying in his presentations, you might want to consider models such as 3 lines of defense model in organizing the different functions that service for the purpose of better financial management and control. So you can use this as a reference point or a benchmark. A very important objective that we wanted to achieve with this webinar series was the one about the ownership and benefits of over FMC reforms. And without taking too time to read through all the content of this slide, I do want to emphasize that what and benefits are to accrue. It is necessary that we professionalize both public sector management and finance function, with a particular emphasis on the critical role of senior management, such as we have seen in the example of the Dutch experience. Benefits include benefits of sound management and control along the lines that Noel elaborated. Will leave more time for senior management to focus on strategic decision making, whereas operational management responsibilities can then be delegated to civil servants capable of performing. FM's decision making recalibrates the focus on strategy and policy and achievement of objectives, and not necessarily simply on control of inputs. And management through FMC management can obtain and provide real assurance that objectives and performance are being met, which can be then verified, as we've heard today from Daniela, through fiscal responsibility statements, or in the Dutch experience through so-called in-control statements. What the point I want to make here is that frequently, again, too much reliance is put on the Ministry of Finance and what it is supposed to do with FMC, or on the finance function on the level of the individual units. However, finance can only serve as an advisor. Do so, it will require significant upgrading in budgets so that it can produce information and provide advice, so each manager can make decisions accordingly. However, ultimately the ownership over functioning of the financial management and control system in the institution will be up to the manager and those to whom he has delegated particular responsibilities and authorities. Speaking of managers, we can see in this slide a very long list that I have compiled from the presentations of our previous speakers about the new requirements of managers, but I will just focus on some of the most important ones, such as that in addition to securing compliance, we are now reshifting the focus as to how efficiency and effectiveness have been achieved. Also, where the decisions are being made, and in particular, which decisions are being made where. Official responsibilities and authorities, knowledge management, and I will not say I won't spend too much time talking about this, but unless we have objectives, risks are arguably infinite, and we could be spending a lot of time implement control activities that are not necessarily better or justified in the given context. Without going into details on all the bullets, I do want to focus on the bullet point next to last, because you heard from Daniela's presentation that the Ministry of Finance is using 3 sources of information, and this so-called triangulation, looking at different sources of information to validate the same observations and findings. Well, this is not and should not be restricted only to the Ministry of Finance, to the Central Harmonization Unit. Every manager in his institution should have access to all these same sources of information, and should in fact be doing on micro level what the CHU is doing on the system-wide public financial management level. What about your policy and action? Because this was one of the objectives of our webinar. Well, I would point out the following key takeaways. The importance of engaging with public administration reform and PM reform proponents early, in ensuring that stakeholders understand PIFC. So for those countries that are now revising or updating their PIFC policy paper, I think there's a lot of networking and of outreach that they should be also doing to other parts of the government, such as Ministry of Administration, such as Public Administration Reform Coordinators offices, etc. The important managerial structures and objectives, something Noel has elaborated, no point in repeating, but certainly a target for the future, and a target that could be attained by better collaboration within government stakeholders. The third bullet point, something that we value highly here at the Center of Excellence in Finance, which is the importance of training and capacity development. I fully subscribe to Noel's observation that there's too little training out there for management on how it should be doing its work. What I would also propose as a topic to explore for future policy and action is how do we ensure that there is a continuous improvement perspective on the institutional level, and what is the role that managers can play there. So what can we do today to make sure that the institution is doing better tomorrow, and do so every day in a continuous improvement cycle. And finally, giving the weight to the central organization, to the Ministry of Finance, in the sense of making sure that systemic issues are addressed centrally. And I really appreciate the work that the colleagues in Croatian Ministry of Finance have been doing on that end. I'll finish with a small reminder, small slide that actually has a question in its title: where does implementation of FMC take place? So it looks at things in a broader context. We have been speaking about public administration reform and governance, obviously things that are happening on the level of the government, with presumably support of the Parliament. We have been talking about PFM and public financial management reform reforms that are taking place on the broader Ministry of Finance level, whether it's improved budgeting, whether it is change accounting, whether it is investment management, public asset management. We have been talking a lot about the PIFC, including both financial management and control and internal audit on the level of the CSU. And these levels are basically external to the budget spending unit. This is where you will find the legislative solution. This is where you will find the manuals, the methodological support, and this is where systemic issues should ideally be addressed. But FMC really lives is on the budget user level, FMC with an asterisk, meaning FMC supported with internal function, because this is internal to the budget spending unit. This is where practical implementation takes place. This is where we need to embed internal controls into activities, processes, and systems in order to promote and support attainment of our objectives. And this is, in fact, where we are supposed to deal with individual issues that the COSO framework covers so well. Two further ingredients: political commitment throughout and adequate resources. Resources required to implement, including capacity development. With this, I would just like to propose, we don't have a lot of time, but I would still like to propose a couple of discussion points in the way forward. And with knowledge of the overall FMC directions, what do you see in your organization, whether you're from the Ministry of Finance or from budget spender? What do you see as the biggest obstacles for implementation? What would be the next steps which you see as a priority? And finally, something that you tell us now or write to us subsequently, which other topics would you like to see covered in future webinars? So public internal financial control, FMC, internal control, and internal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nihat, for summarizing key points of this FMC webinar series. Nihat introduced a couple of discussion points. We have just a couple of one session that we can take. Unfortunately, there were no questions, so probably this also means that topics that what was covered also covered what you wanted to hear. But in any case, if you have anything to share, any question, you can share it in chat. Maybe I would just 3 minutes maybe to turn to our speakers, maybe to Mr. Noel Hepworth, because also Nihat told us that also with this FMC webinar series we wanted to inform future policy actions. So what would be your suggestion on steps that needs to be taken in countries to further implement FMC? No, have any consideration on this? Or also, Daniela, you are also informed the situation in other countries. So if you have anything to share about this. No?
Sorry?
Yes.
Yeah, while waiting for Noel to get back in touch, to go into policy formulation, to how you actually plan for the next steps. I think it's very important that we understand the current when writing PIFC policy papers. It's of ultimate importance that we have evidence-based, ideally evidence-based information to make the decision upon. And this is again where I think the role of both the ministries, the spending units, the MoF is important, because some issues will remain individual questions that we really want to capture in a strategic policy level document to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Me.
Yes, we can hear now.
Sorry. Well, I would echo what Nihad has said, because what I think is often lacking is any clear guidance to go through the process. Most of the guidance that's available is does emphasize the role of the management. It does emphasize the role of the importance of objectives. It treats it simply as a financial reform. And for those of us who've offered guidance in the past, in the sense of doing a disservice to countries because haven't looked at the managerial side, the managerial implications that they should. And the problem is that, as Nihad has mentioned, that FMC should be integrated with public administration reform and treated as entirely separate. So the agencies, the European Commission, the consultants supporting introducing FMC do not bring together management reform and FMC reform. They treat them as separate things. So as a result, no talks to each other, and therefore there's a really lack of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Noel. So if I can maybe summarize, so there is need for shift of mindset, also treating reforms not separately, also importance of networking institutions.
Indeed, yes.
Maybe in short, of course, there are also other. Maybe Daniela, something as a concluding, because you have a lot of experience from with how this should be speaking, I can see it in your video, but we can't hear you. Now I think we will be able to hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it okay? Well, it was really also pleasant for me to hear again and the way how he pointed out the crucial issues regarding really importance of involvement of managers. And of course that in practice this could be very challengeable and difficult for majority of managers in public sector. Really as at the end to see what we are talking about, we really need to change managers, and we really need to support them and to help them and to convince them, and then they will have the benefits. I would like that I like a lot also the slide that colleague Nihad prepared, the last slide, where I think it's on illustrative way presented how in fact this is all connected from FMC, from level of, let's say, details in budget organization, ordinary job that everybody is facing, that we need to improve and to do on some different way, that everybody who in this cycle from Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Public Administration, depending who is responsible for each part of this reform process, it should have clear. And I fully agree what Noel is saying, and I can personally say that I had many times situation where it was really needed to convince these let's say leaders of reforms, no matter from which part they are coming from, PAR or FMC or financial PFM or anti-corruption, etc., that there are so many links. But if you are presenting these reforms as separate processes, you are just making some kind of chaos in the system. And in fact, if you see as a leader of these changes and reforms with whom you are connected, then the small cycle in Nihad, the last slide to FMC is in fact happening we have completely chaotic picture what we want from them to do. So I think that it has been a nice complementary approach, Kader and Noel with their presentation, and I think that it's very clear. We need to work together, especially the ones who are leading reform processes, and to find common ground and to simplify the presentation, what we are expecting from managers, but to focus more on helping them on the daily and concrete action that they can in fact show and prove what we are expecting from them.
Thank you, Daniela, for this actually concluding thoughts. It's very nice that we agree with each other. We find what is further strengthen FMC, but a lot will need to be done, and we will, as a knowledge hub, we will of course support and try to inform these reforms in the future in the way we do currently. Yeah, as we are running out of time, I would like to thank really everybody. First of all, speakers, to Daniela Stepic, Noel Hapford, and my colleague Nihat Nakash for taking your time, for your comprehensive presentation, for really valuable insight in the reforms process, and also some suggestions that can inform future plans. I'd like to also thank you very much, participants, for staying with us throughout the webinar. Hope that you got some ideas, some answers, and you will stay to us. So I wish you a good day, and thank you for today, and see you on another occasion. Bye bye.
Thank you. I hope you feel it was a worthwhile effort. Though for some reason I've lost my picture. I don't quite understand why.
I know, but during the presentation it went very well. We saw you throughout the presentation, so it was probably only at the end. So
yeah.
it was okay.
Great.
Yeah, we will have a nice day.
Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We will be in touch.
Yes.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.